Hello everybody and welcome to the second shift of Paradigm Shift. My name is Austin. Today we have our special guest Collin and the producer of Paradigm Shift, Roman, that we're going to be discussing a few issues. We're first going to talk about the Michael Brown case of last week. We're going to talk about the Sony, North Korea, and the government's response to that and how that situation is evolving. And finally, we're going to talk about the change in calendars, or the potential change in calendars, here in North Carolina around the school. Anyway, stick around. We might even shift your paradigm. Alright, well before we move on to this week's topics, why don't we talk a little bit about how you guys feel and what your opinion was on the Michael Brown case and what happened in Ferguson, Missouri. Collin, can you speak a little bit more about how you feel about that issue specifically?
Well, yes. Obviously, it's, sad that the family lost a relative, and that's never an easy thing to deal with. And equally as important of an issue, though, is all of the rioting and the protesting that's been going on in the city, because that is having just as profound an effect as the grand jury decision.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Do you think that the kind of riots and protesting and all the vandalism that happened, thousands of dollars in damage to the local businesses and stuff, do you think that was effective in promoting change, or is there some kind of alternative that the people who came into Ferguson should have taken?
Well, I do know that rioting is probably never the best way to express how you feel about a certain issue. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I'd like to say most of the riots that happened in that area most likely weren't caused by the people of Ferguson, Missouri. You see in the reports, a lot of the people came from outside of the city and outside of the town of Ferguson, and even out of the state of Missouri. Some people even came from Florida to go up there and protest in the rioting and the protesting that took place at that time. There was a lot of people who actually did it peacefully, but they weren't acknowledged because of all the other stuff that was happening. Police cars being burnt, buildings being burnt down, officers being tested to their limits of what would happen, and luckily no one got hurt in the protest. But I was scared there for a while.
So back to the original question, though, is that effective in bringing about change? And what even was the change they were looking for? What was the objective in these riots and protests?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of them. I'm sure it was an outlet, to express outrage at the grand jury's decision.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like their energy could have been, spent bettering the community instead of tearing it down. Some of the protests that were going on also impaired members of the community. There was one protest where they blocked off a section of the highway, and that stopped Ferguson residents from getting to their jobs. And so obviously the people who come into Ferguson, their actions will have repercussions on the community that, that should be considered.
All right, well, before we go on to this week's issues, the last question I would have for you, Collin, is racism still an issue in this country, or are people really making a mountain out of a molehill when it comes to these issues of so-called racism? And when was the last time you personally had to deal with racism?
I do feel that issues like racism and sexism are prevalent in today's society. Minorities will always have to face some adversity. Like, for example, when was the last time Hispanics weren't the subject of, a joke about their work effort, or them all being illegal Mexicans, or, we should deport them all because they're all obviously illegal. And then about your question about racism, I had an instance this past semester when I was working where one of my colleagues, who was black, well, he was African actually, he was treated unfairly by some customers because he wasn't like the rest of us.
Okay. So that's even an instance of American black and white people treating just foreigners, period. Was it more of a issue of race, or was it an issue of him being foreign?
Oh no, it was race.
It was race. Okay, alright. So on to this week's subject matter. We're going to talk a little bit about how Sony pulled the release of their movie, The Interview, because of the hacking that happened with North Korea, and the threat of terror that their influence that they had on the situation. Do you think that Sony acted correctly?
I feel like they were acting as a business. Before this incident of North Korea's hacking, they had employee documents released and a lot of private information, regarding like future movie plans released. And so they were more than likely acting in the sense of protecting themselves as a company. They didn't want more information, to possibly get leaked.
Yeah, that's very true. What happens is these big end hackers, they go into these companies and they release this data and they make a threat, and then you either meet that threat or you have the possibility of this happening. What I find funny is that North Korea is the one doing this. I don't know why I find that funny. It's because they're always there. They've always been here, and they just happen to go ahead and hack this movie. This is a comedy, and the funny thing is their country can't take a joke. They said, and I quote, that this would be an utmost act of terrorism if this movie got released. It's a movie about killing Kim Jong-un as a joke. If it was graphic and actually showing, his death actually was released, leaked, and it was just funny. It's just pure comedy. And their government, Kim Jong-un, can't take the smallest bit of criticism without going crazy. They're threatening to terrorize America to a point, and it's like, why?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's go on that. Is North Korea, when they say we're going to take the release of this movie as a threat and against us as a country, and then we're going to react as this was a real threat? Is North Korea even a threat? Should we take them seriously when they say, "Oh, we're going to act as this was a real threat against us, and then we're going to react accordingly"? Should we even take that as a real threat? We don't even know a bunch of what's happening inside North Korea these days.
I think North Korea right now isn't really a threat. If they get their minds to it and start doing stuff, they'll be threatening. But right now, they can't even launch a rocket. If Iran had these nuclear weapons that they claim that the North Korea claims that they had, we would be in serious trouble because they're determined to take people out. They're determined to.
Yeah, as in if Iran had the nuclear weapons like North Korea says it has nuclear. Okay.
Yeah, in that way, we would be more dire and we would be more threat. But they're just really there, and they're all bark, no bite. They have their massive army. They have their big leader. They have all their citizens starving. They don't care about their citizens. All he wants is fame. All Kim Jong-un. This isn't actually a North Korea problem. This is Kim Jong-un problem.
Okay, so moving into what the president said when he came out and had a press conference soon after all this kind of came out with Sony's actions in response to North Korea. He brought it up as a point that we need more internet security and that the government should really step in making sure that happens. Is that something that is the government's responsibility, or is that more of these companies' responsibility in protecting their customers, protecting their employees? We had in 2005, Sony was warned that its employees had weak passwords and weak security. And then just following very soon after that, their PlayStation system was hacked. And so whose responsibility is it to make sure that companies stay protected?
I do feel like the very first, first means of protection should be the company itself. If you're establishing this workplace for people to come to, you need to provide them adequate security. And I know that Roman had another good point about that.
I think what it is, the first point of protection is the company needs to secure its policy, make sure that it does background checks on whoever's coming in, so that we know that they're not foreign terrorists, they're not present terrorists here, or anyone who wants to cause harm.
So you're saying that we protect against if these hacks are an inside job.
A lot of these have been inside jobs.
Okay, so not even from the outside.
Not even from the outside.
Okay.
And then the next step, if something does happen from North Korea or any other major threat to us, as far as the government's concerned,
Mm-hmm.
then you have to bring in the government to bring in their professional hackers and anti-hackers, but not put a broadband security over all the internet. Just the
Well,
situation.
yeah, I would bring up that, the government is very good at protecting its people when it comes to military-wise. I mean, we've got a great military. We are kind of the police officers of the world. Some people, whether agree or disagree with that, we are. But when it comes to internet security and things regarding websites and such, the government does not have the best track record. I mean, we saw the healthcare website has costed millions on millions of dollars, and the government really hasn't produced that great of a website. Why should we give the government the responsibility to do that when Google and a lot of these other companies have done a great job of protecting themselves, and they know the business, they know what they're doing, they have the professionals to protect themselves, to protect their clients. I don't think the government is really the best person to be given that responsibility, because once they step in, we saw this with Social Security and the way they've been using that, they usually will overplay their power in this situation, and the internet has been a great spot for people to kind of come. It's a no man's land in some sense, and we've done a pretty good job of, having the internet be a more or less safe place over these past, decades of having the internet around. I mean, we're always going to have hackers, but there's a lot of companies that have done a great job at protecting themselves. Is the government really the best person to step in and offer those protections?
I think no. I don't think the government is anywhere supposed to be helping the American people with internet security. That's a user's problem. But when it comes to national security, like again, Kim Jong-un, the North Koreans threatening to do stuff due to this thing that happened, that's when I personally think that the government needs to actually start taking action for that case scenario. Not putting up security, but finding out who did it and where.
Okay, so stepping in after the fact.
After the fact. They don't need to put a broadband security thing over. Just they come in after the fact, but it's the user's responsibility to prevent stuff from being hacked.
So are you saying, like, when corporations only are hacked, that the government should step in? Or?
I think there should be even systems for users of the private public, but there can be problems with this because there can be certain sites that you go to that you really shouldn't be going to, and things could be avoided. So it could be easily abused. A law like this, if it did pass.
I think it does help that it was identified or confirmed that it was North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have like a solid.
Then we know it was them. It wasn't just.
Though North Korea is saying they are innocent of being involved with this, but you said the FBI confirmed that it was them.
The president did say that it was them.
Okay.
Again, the president sometimes goes off on a limb saying his stuff and then says, "Well, I was just saying it out of what I've said." You've seen it several times.
Okay.
What's happened? So we don't know if this is confirmed, but all I know is that the president said this.
Okay. Another fair point is that the president was talking about how we can't be bullied into submission by other countries or these big foreign, leaders. But, we had just, in the past few years with Benghazi, where we had the guy come out with this video and it was blamed for sparking all this controversy and the deaths of several of our foreign officials, and the president kind of bullying, that man. He was in prison now.
He is in prison currently, right now, and no one's done anything to stop it.
Yeah, is that a double standard?
That's just purely hypocritical and almost just reckless of the president to go around and say, you know what, we can't post videos like this and not be sensitive to other people. When the internet, again, as you said, is almost a no man's land to the point where you can post what you want to, and if you don't like it, you don't have to watch it.
Yeah.
And the fact that he says, this man's been arrested for posting a bad video responsible for the murders of these 4 people. He's blaming them for the responsibility of the death of those Americans. And if Sony were to post this movie, would they be responsible for a war?
Yeah, that poses a very good question. That poses a very good question indeed. But the thing is we don't know for sure, because it was brought up later on after the fact with this YouTube video when we're talking about Benghazi, that the YouTube video wasn't really to blame, that these people were sparking.
And the fact that it's a YouTube video. Anyone can post anything on YouTube as long as it's not anything seductive or anything that could be,
that goes against their policy.
Goes against their policy.
Yeah.
And
so that's a freedom of speech issue.
That's a freedom of speech issue.
No matter whether it causes riots or not, that's not the issue. It's a freedom of speech. They should
and if
be
YouTube
allowed.
had a problem, they can just take it off. There you go, problem solved. It's not the user's problem.
Well, and so in the same way, movies have their own set of standards in a way, but it is an issue of free speech. Is our free speech able to be bullied by these foreign nations?
Well, right now it is, and right
that's
now
just prove that it can be.
Right now it's being bullied, and no one's doing anything to stop it, and that's what we need to be working on now.
Do you think that that's going to be an issue in the future? That other countries are going to take offense to a movie that's going to be coming out and being able to
There's
bully?
never a guarantee of safety or people not being offended by this stuff.
That's true. I mean, anything is going to offend someone.
Yeah.
Anything you say is going to be offensive to someone.
Even this video is probably offending somebody out there.
I'm sure it is.
I'm sure it is. There's probably someone mad at the screen right now. If you don't like the video, you can turn it off, and that's a good policy, I think. If you don't like it, don't watch it.
Yeah, and affect your own change in your own way. So as of right now, the president, in conjunction with the FBI, have said that it is confirmed that it's North Korea, whereas North Korea is saying they are innocent at this time of this being filmed. Okay. All right. Well, why don't we move on to the local news? The last topic of today is that there's some organizations, the John Locke Foundation, which is a more conservative organization. We've got a liberal organization too, I believe. The North Carolina Justice Center, which is a more liberal organization, coming together to kind of change a law in North Carolina of saying that schools here in North Carolina have to start at a certain time, right around August 26th, and have to end at a certain time, right around June 11th. And so they're trying to change these laws so that individual schools, as I understand it, can make their own decisions on when school is going to start, when school is going to end. And one of the teachers here from Athens Drive High School said that he was for kind of this change because it's a strain on the students to take the exams, their midterm exams, or their final exams for one semester and then move on to the next semester after Christmas break. And it would just be more convenient and better for the students if they were to take the exams before Christmas, then go on break, and then have, the second semester start anew. But on the other side, the argument is that having this kind of liquidness with when schools were going to start and end would mess up vacation plans, summer camps, all these organizations that kind of bank on schools in North Carolina starting and ending at basically the same time. Which side of the debate do you stand on?
I am definitely for the alterations for the calendar year. I feel like public high schools have already taken a leap toward adapting a more collegiate way in how they do things. There are certain high schools that are adopting the 10-point grading scale, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like being able to take your final exams before break and then just starting a fresh new semester in the new year would be the best way to handle all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And as for the the concerns about summer break, I feel like the focus should be more on preparing students for college, because you can obviously work around summer plans and vacations. It's not like this decision would affect every single school district.
Yeah, no, that's very true. That's very true. And yeah, it seems like summer camps and such would be able to make the adjustments needed.
Right.
People go to summer camps for different times there's, at this point, a perfect example of that is I read somewhere, because I'm hoping to work at a summer camp this summer, that there's a summer camp that specifically had a session for students that had time off during I think it was the winter season or the spring. It wasn't a summer camp. It was a camp being held at a different time during the year to year-round students that get special time off.
Right.
And so they've already adjusted themselves to, hey, we've got a need, we've got a demand for time, a camp, but it's not during the summer because they only get a couple weeks off during the summer, a few weeks off during the summer. So we've got all these kids that want to be doing something during the school year when they have a larger break, and they adjust themselves. It seems like it's something that camps and organizations can do.
And I would argue that most high school students might not necessarily be the ones in summer camps, or that might be more of like an elementary, middle school student concern.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the high school students, they should be more focused on, all right, well, if this is what it's going to be like in college, since I'm already getting graded like I am a college student, I should be on a calendar like I am a college student.
Yeah. So maybe have the law that changes the calendar only more catered toward high school students. Push the high school calendar around so that the high school students can take their exams and then have summer break, and then also based on other projects or something that comes up later on in the year, or prepping those students for college, that can be liquid. But then for these elementary and maybe middle school students that their exams and testing is not as preparatory to college, have those stay on that strict kind of start here, end here.
Right.
And those are the ones that are going to summer camp anyway, right?
Right, yeah, I think that's a fair compromise.
I would be interested to see this article, how this kind of evolves. So before we wrap up, Roman, as a homeschool student, how does something like this affect you?
This really affects me when it comes to social means, like interacting with friends who do go to public school or private schools. As it's shown, my schedule is more like I do a year round, and then I take off certain days and I make them up later in the year. So I can go off on the middle of the week if I needed to go filming something or go even do this show. It's just easier for me to do this, and when my friends are able to take break off, it's good for me because I can hang out with them, and I'm really neutral as long as it affects
As long as you still have your friends.
As long as I still have my friends. As long as it affects them in a positive way and doesn't cause more stress as schools are.
Now, have any of your friends that are in high school? How have you have they kind of voiced the stress of having to take exams after their Christmas break and they wished? Have they ever voiced that they want to take them before? Because I know, as Collin and I, we went to the same high school, and we always felt that was a real issue. That it was such a strain, because when you get onto like psychologically, you get into the point where you're like, okay, I'm on break. You don't want to study on break. Who really studies on break anyway? If you do, it's like forced at the last minute before you go in. Yep. Are you really prepared to take an exam that's going to give you the grade and really going to add? That's going to be your high school GPA, is the final, your final grade. These final exams count for 25% of the final grade, and so you're not really given a great opportunity to study, recap what you've learned the entire year, when the week before the exam, you've just taken an entire break. It's so crunched at the end, it just doesn't make sense to make a lasting impression on your transcript. Have you heard any of that voiced with your friends?
I haven't really heard any complaints about it, but what I'd like to say, what would make sense, is the student is encouraged to study during the time that they have at home. Now, that sounds stupid, like, on my free break I'm not going to study. But whenever they can, just make sure they recap every day, just kind of what they've learned.
Yeah, but nobody does that.
Nobody does it, but it's there. It's an option that's out for the child.
Yeah, it's there, but no one does that.
No one does that. You're right, but it should be done.
So wouldn't it make more sense to just have the exam before, when
is there a break
students
before?
are studying
Is
on
there
the
a break
break?
before
We both think it's a good idea.
It's a good idea to have it. Yeah, before
the new semester and the new year.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Austin.
I'm Collin.
I'm Roman.
Tune in next week for some other current, up-to-date stories. If you felt strongly about something we talked about, leave it in the comments below. If you wanted to learn more about a story we talked about, find it in the description below. See you next week. Hopefully we shifted your paradigm.